everyone, it's time to take a ride on the L train. I'm your host, Scott Rubin. I'm a licensed associate real estate broker with Compass in New York City, selling residential real estate in Manhattan and Brooklyn since 2005. Today on the podcast, everything you've ever wanted to know about co-ops and condos. Before we begin, I just wanted to thank everyone for listening to the podcast. I've had a very impressive number of downloads after uploading just the first few episodes, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate each and every one of you. That said, let's get started, and stand clear of the closing doors, please. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, co-ops versus condos. This is one of those topics I always discuss when I first meet with buyers, because it's very important to understand the differences. I remember several years ago having several buyers in a row come to my office and say, "I don't want a co-op," without really understanding why. I realized that there were lots of misconceptions when I heard things like, "They don't let you renovate," or "They don't allow pets," or "They don't allow sublets." But we'll get to those things in the end. Let's get started with the basics. Ownership. A condo is considered real property. It's just like buying a house, but inside of an apartment building. You own everything from the walls in, and floors and ceiling and everything in that cube is yours. A co-op, on the other hand, is a corporation. You are purchasing shares in that corporation and are considered a shareholder, not a property owner. You then sign a lease entitling you to live in that apartment. Availability. There are a lot more co-ops than condos in New York City. About 75% are co-ops. Now, it does depend on where you're looking. For example, if you're looking for an apartment in the West Village, most will be co-ops. And if you're looking for the same thing in Williamsburg, most will be condos. Price. Condos are more expensive than co-ops. There are less of them. Anyone can purchase them, including investors and foreign buyers, so they have a larger audience. So condos are priced at a premium. When financing, condos also have much higher closing costs. Since condos are real property, you need to pay mortgage tax and title insurance, which is quite expensive. Down payment. Condos typically allow 90% financing, so you can put down as little as 10%, but nowadays 20% is the standard. Co-ops traditionally allow no more than 80% financing, so 20% down is usually the minimum. Many co-ops require more than a 20% down payment, so pay attention to that while searching. Owner-occupants and investors. Essentially anyone can purchase a condo. Condos are investor-friendly. You can purchase a condo and rent it out from day one with very few restrictions. Condos also appeal to foreign buyers who don't typically have U.S. tax returns or the credit history required for co-op approval. Co-ops prefer owner-occupants. They typically do have sublet policies, but with much more restrictions and only for a limited time period. A good example of this is a co-op may allow you to sublet 2 out of every 5 years, but only after you have occupied the apartment yourself for at least a year or 2. They may also charge a percentage of your monthly maintenance as a fee, or they may not. There are many different co-ops with many variations of this. Co-ops do not want investors. They want the apartment to be your primary residence. One of the main benefits of a co-op is living in a community of like-minded owners. You know who your neighbors are, and they all have been vetted by the board. Owners typically take better care of the building and are more respectful to their neighbors. Not that there aren't great tenants and horrible owners, because there are. It's just that tenants are more likely to cause issues, and there's typically a higher turnover with people coming and going more frequently. Approval. As long as you can get a mortgage or have cash, you can purchase a condo. Anyone can purchase a condo as long as they have the means to pay for it. Co-ops, on the other hand, require board approval. You will need to qualify financially and attend a board interview. It's more difficult to qualify for a co-op than it is for a mortgage, so keep that in mind. Fun fact, this is one of the reasons why New York City wasn't as bad as many other places after the 2008 financial crisis. Even though banks were giving mortgages away to anyone with a pulse, co-ops are much more difficult to qualify for than your typical mortgage, and in New York City, about 75% of apartments are co-ops. One of the most important parts of the initial consultation I have with my clients is to go over their financials and make sure that we are only looking at co-ops that they can qualify for, which is a crucial part of the process and one of the ways a buyer's agent can provide value to their clients. Keep in mind that both co-ops and condos typically require a board package, which is another thing that your broker can help you with. It's basically an application, credit background check, and a bunch of supporting documents they may ask for, including proof of employment, photo ID, bank statement, and so on. There may also be documents needed by the building, such as window guard, lead-based paint riders, or gym riders. Then we assemble everything into a big book with a table of contents and chapters. It's extensive, and working with somebody like me makes it much easier and removes lots of the headaches, so make sure you have an amazing broker. As a side note, I've seen some brokers that do a lot of business hand me a board package that looks like it was done by a child. It's pretty upsetting to see that, and it can easily kill the deal. I know, when you're choosing an agent, it's not something you may be able to determine yourself, so just make sure that you use your best judgment and work with somebody who seems experienced and thorough. Or just reach out to me. There may also be fees ranging from a couple of $100 to a couple of $1,000 depending on the building. The difference with a co-op application is that they will want you to fill out a financial statement and produce statements from all of your banking and investment accounts, tax returns, etc., just to make sure that you're qualified to be a shareholder. They may require you to have a certain DTI or debt-to-income ratio and a certain amount of money in the bank after you close or post-closing liquidity. Condo board packages can get pretty extensive too, which I'm not a huge fan of since they don't approve or deny your application based on financials. But it is what it is, so you usually need to present whatever they're asking for regardless. A condo just needs to waive their right of first refusal, which is pretty much guaranteed. The only way they wouldn't is if they were prepared to purchase the condo unit at the same price outlined in the contract. The most frequently used example of this is when a condo needs an apartment for a live-in super and they're able to afford to purchase one. They would step in and buy it from the seller. Okay, let's get into some misconceptions about co-ops. Starting with, they don't let you renovate. Well, of course they want you to renovate. This increases the value of your apartment, and if you sell, it'll trade at a higher price. Every shareholder should want the apartments to sell for a higher amount because it increases the value of their investment too. You may need to present it to the board, fill out an alteration agreement, show architectural plans, but that may be the case with a condo too. In my condo building, for example, I'm supposed to submit an alteration agreement to hang a picture. All right, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but there are strict condos out there as well. They don't allow pets. Many co-ops allow pets. It may be more likely to find a strict co-op since they are made up of mostly owner-occupants, but we can find that out beforehand, and you can definitely find a co-op that takes your dog or cat. They don't allow sublets. Well, co-ops prefer owner-occupants and typically do not want investors. However, most co-ops do have sublet policies. However, they're usually designed for situations where the owner needs to leave for a period of time and does not wish to sell. An example would be that you need to move far away for a year or two for school or for work, and you want to rent it out while you're gone. They won't appreciate as much. Well, I don't believe that's true. From my experience, the entire market moves up and down together. They will be harder to sell. Well, a co-op transaction is more difficult than a condo transaction, but co-ops make up about 75% of the apartments out there, which I've said several times already, and there's always co-op buyers out there. They're more common than condos are, so I don't think that's an important argument. Okay, now we're going to head into the bonus round for co-ops. If you want to know even more about co-ops, you've come to the you've hit the right virtual button on your device. First things first, it's important to take a moment to recognize that all co-ops are different. They all have slightly different rules and requirements, and as an agent, I do my best to find these things out beforehand so we know how good of a chance we have for approval. Debt-to-income ratio. Co-ops look for you to have a certain debt-to-income ratio. Some co-ops have a number they would like you to be under in order to qualify, and of course, others do not. We typically look for that number to be lower than 28 to 30%, or maybe even 25% for a stricter co-op. This is a much lower debt-to-income ratio requirement than banks will have when you're applying for a loan. However, many board members don't seem to know what I'm talking about when I ask them this question, or they claim to not have a number. Post-closing liquidity. Co-ops also prefer that you have money in the bank at the end of the deal, or post-closing liquidity. The classic rule of thumb is to have 2 years of maintenance and mortgage payments available after you close. This includes all liquid assets, so stocks or anything that can be turned into cash in a few business days. I'm not sure if co-ops are looking at cryptocurrency yet, but it probably depends on who's on the board. Pied-à-terres. Now, I'm not sure why we need to use fancy French words to describe this next one, or even if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but a pied-à-terre is a snooty way of saying vacation home. Co-ops typically prefer that you use your apartment as your primary residence. They may not allow a pied-à-terre situation where you're absent for the majority of the time. Many co-ops do allow this, but there are enough that don't to make this worth mentioning. Gifting the down payment. If you don't qualify for a co-op or have the funds needed, you may need help from a parent. It's quite common for parents to gift part or all of the down payment to their children, which is typically allowed, but not always. This would need to be accompanied by a gift letter from the parent stating that they do not intend to be repaid for these funds. That leads into parents purchasing for or with children. If you do not qualify for a co-op, some of them may have other options for you. Your parent can be your guarantor, where they co-sign for the apartment and are liable in case you stop making payments. The parent could also co-purchase the apartment with you, and you will act as equal shareholders. Or some co-ops will allow the parent to purchase for the child. In this instance, some co-ops will want the child to be working and to be able to cover the monthly expenses too. There is also a difference between parents purchasing for working children and parents purchasing for students. One of the more challenging searches is when a parent of a college student has the brilliant idea that they'd be much better off buying an apartment for their child as an investment instead of flushing thousands and thousands of dollars away for a rental or a dorm. Now, this is a great idea until you realize that most of the affordable apartments surrounding areas such as NYU happen to be co-ops and they don't want their buildings to be turned into dorms. This is certainly possible, and I've done many of these deals. They're just much more difficult to find. But that's why you work with an amazing broker like myself, right? Yeah. Working with a broker. It's incredibly important to work with an experienced, knowledgeable, dedicated, hardworking agent like myself who understands the process and will do their very best to make sure that you're applying to a co-op that you will likely get approved for. If a co-op board does turn down the applicants, it can be so heartbreaking for everyone involved, and it can cost both the buyer and the seller lots of money and a few months of their time. Furthermore, the co-op does not have to tell you why you were turned down, which makes things even worse. That said, most co-op deals I do go pretty smoothly, and the buyers leave the interview very relieved that it was so laid back and much more of a pleasant experience than they expected. Okay, so that was a lot about co-ops and condos. You probably know more about the subject than many real estate agents do, which is both funny and sad. So if you'd like to talk more about co-ops and condos, and even tie it in with your particular situation, feel free to reach out. I would love to continue the conversation. That wraps up this episode of the L Train Podcast. I'm Scott Rubin, licensed associate real estate broker with Compass in New York City. That said, all views expressed in this podcast are my own. I've been selling real estate in Manhattan and Brooklyn since January 25th, 2005, and I'd love to work with you. So if you or anyone you know are looking to buy a home, sell a home, or are a landlord looking to rent out their home, please contact me. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to talk to you soon.